what I had here was a situation where I was, it was basically on that old blue car over there, and it was saying, the lady that was driving it was one of the, college ladies was driving it, and she's basically said, I have got an issue where, I've got a, somebody unplugged that. I got an issue where I'm having sounds coming out from under the car, I mean, under the hood, even with the key switched off. I switch off the key, I'm still hearing sounds. I'm hearing, noises. And she really couldn't describe it all that well. But I went ahead and got it in there. And, this Crown Victoria, when I started, one of the guys that I got working at Ford dealer, he had gone to the Ford training. And they were talking about this 4.6 liter engine. They said when they was designing it in the late 1980s, they kept tuning it and jacking up the power on it and everything. And it's, they can do that with electronically and all that, with fuel delivery and everything. And they were going to see what it would take to tear it apart. So they got it up to nearly 900 horsepower before it tore itself apart. And they detuned it down to about 200 horsepower, and it lasts a long time now. So it's really a solid engine. But there's always weak links on stuff. The weak links that you find a lot of the times on the Crown Victoria, that it was 5 years before we had to do any engine work on one in the shop when I was working at the dealer. When they came out in '91 on the town car in the Lincoln, in the Crown Victoria got them a year after that. Anyway, the long and the short of it is it went really well, but these little sensors right here, the little metal sensor for the DPFE, they used to die all the time, and they were aggravating to get to when they first put them on there. Weak links in the chain. When you're working in a place where you're always working on the same kind of car, that you know exactly where to go. A lot of the times if you see 42 cars come through here that all have the same kind of a problem, then that's where you make your money, because you can basically find the problem and fix it really quick, and you still get paid the same amount of labor, particularly if you're on commission. Anyway, all right. See a lot of these newly designed power plants, and there's always new weak links you got to find out about. Now, no 4.6 ever had a distributor. Spark plugs were going away. They initially had spark plugs, and that went away too, and they put coil-on plug. Let me ask you this for your engine performance people. Why is coil-on plug better than coil plug or distributor when it comes to ignition? Why in the world would we want to have each cylinder with a dedicated coil? There has to be a reason for that, right?
If one goes out, it still runs.
Huh?
If one goes out, it still runs.
Well, not just that, but what they, all right, how many of you guys have ever had to change a knock sensor on something? You ever heard of a knock sensor? Yeah. Like on a Chevrolet pickup, the knock sensors are down in the valley, You'll get to do one. You will. You got to pull the upper intake off. You got them two little sensors under them rubber cups right in the middle of the valley, and they're basically listening for engine knock. And I'm not talking about rod knocking, I'm talking about labor knocking. Like if one cylinder has basically got some ping, like if the mix is lighting off too soon and it rings the piston like a bell when it's going up. They used to call that valve clatter, but it's got nothing to do with the valve. It's got everything to do with, the pre-ignition because of combustion chamber, deposits or stuff like that. But anyway, it can tell by listening, like it knows where everything is. If one particular cylinder has a pinion, it can retard the timing on that one particular cylinder if it's got separate coils. They want everything to be more precise is what it amounts to. So it can have a slightly different timing advance on every cylinder as it feels like it needs to do for reasons like that or whatever. Well, this one here, the driver reported she heard a humming noise after switching the key off, but then the noise had stopped after she cycled the key off and on. And so I says, was the humming coming from the back? Because I figured maybe the fuel pump relay contacts might be stuck and it might be going, humming all the time. Wasn't coming from the back, coming from under the hood. So it was coming from the front, but it stopped when you switch the key on and then off again, and that shot the fuel pump theory as far as that, especially because it comes from the front. Now, it needed an oil change anyway, so I put it on the lift and I did an oil change. Why not? It's one of the fake cars anyhow. So the first thing I noticed was the noise coming from the engine compartment. It didn't even remotely resemble a hum. It was a clicking at about 2 hertz. Click, 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 click. What the heck is that? It was as regular as clockwork, and it happened only with the key off. So it could be a typical computer glitch, and I've seen strange things happen before, and I just kind of figured out what this was. And one day this new car delivery guy came to me and said he had a brand new Aerostar that was prepping, and he had a flashing high beam indicator. And it was just blinking on and off like a little turn signal when he put it on high beam lights. And so the only, on that one, all it was a little socket where you put the bulb in there. I reached back there and put my finger on that and pushed it in a little tighter and it quit blinking. And we just had to tweak those terminals a little bit. See a little high beam indicator there? And there it is right there. So it wasn't hooked up to anything special on that one. You know, of course, on the ones that this one didn't have daytime running light. So the newer cars, see that little, back in the late 60s, they started putting these things back behind the dash, and they get their power and ground through those two little terminals that touch that printed circuit. And when I put my finger on that thing and pulled on it, the one that was carrying the bulb for the high beam indicator, it stayed on. And so here we go, you know, the flashing stopped. All right, that's what I had to bend a little bit to make that quit happening. I don't know how you'd even duplicate that, but that was very strange. It was on a brand new vehicle. Well, on the Crown Victoria, I can hear two of these relays clicking off and on. Just click, 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 click. One of them was the power relay and the other one was the fuel pump relay. And you've seen that before on that Crown Vic over there. These things are clicking off and on. So what in the world is going to cause that? So I'm saying, what the heck is that? So I put the breakout box on and hooked the scope up to it, and this is what I was getting. Real cyclic clicking. So there's a nice picture of what I'm supposed to do with this. You know, I'm thinking, that's obviously what we got going on there. So I had seen Bad PCM do that. This article I wrote about my friend's truck, I went by one afternoon and looked at his truck. It was sitting there doing crazy stuff and firing the coil and all kind of wacky stuff. And I was looking for grounds and everything, and I figured, well, it turned out that one there had a bad engine controller on it. And I had actually taken the engine controller off of this truck, which was the bad truck, and I put it on his dad's truck, which was the same year model. And when I put the engine controller on his dad's truck, it started acting the same way. Now, the problem with putting his dad's engine controller, which is a good truck, on the bad truck is you may burn up the good engine controller, and you may wind up with two bad ones. So it's best to put the one that's not working, the engine controller is not working right. The engine will hurt the truck, but a bad truck might destroy an engine controller. Does that make sense? Because I'm telling you that? Okay. But anyway, that's all right. So I checked the battery ground cable connection in the engine block, and on the fender near the master cylinder, everything was fine there. So it was time to peek into the PID window for clues. You know, look at the scan tool. This new generation star tester plugged in. The key switched on. I found nothing but a 1288 trouble code telling me the cylinder head temperature sensor had at some point recorded a reading that was too hot. And that was an interesting, think about this now. As we get closer to where our problem is, you're going to find out what's going on here. I mean, that's important. That's something that you know, was part of it. So that's my first real clues of what was going on. But I didn't realize it later on. I looked into the data stream. I saw a normal reading for the coolant head temperature sensor with a cold engine, about 3.6 volts, but I wanted to know more than that. Okay, so the memory code was a necessary rabbit trail, and I should have done the engine off test, but I got sidetracked and I decided to check the coolant, which, as it turned out, was a little bit low. This was another clue. There was no coolant in the oil, and nothing leaking on the ground, so maybe it was an intake or head gasket leaking. Plastic intake is a legendary leaker, but on this one it wasn't leaking. So how has this got to do with something going click, 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 click? Not that? All right, so I added about a gallon of coolant, made a mental note. I needed to keep track of the coolant level the next time we looked at it. So I ran the engine for a little while and monitored the cylinder head temperature, but didn't see anything. And I found myself gathering data too fast and with too little time to sort it out. So I plugged another PCM I had on hand in, and the clicking noise was still there. So the PCM wasn't causing it on this one. And so here we go. So here, look at these, on these 104 pin. You see the ground is green ones, the black ones aren't used, and then the 71 and 97 is your power. All right, and they were showing some unusual voltage activity that would explain why the other pins were so lively. See that? That's really strange. I kept seeing odd voltage there at those things. And so I homed in on the column, moved to the underhood fuse panel before we called the PDC, and I started pulling fuses until the clicking stopped. While I was in that area, I noticed a burning smell. What's this burning I'm smelling over here? All right, see that little relay center back there? You know what those two relays are? There's a big relay and a little relay in there. One of the relays is a starter relay,
One's a
the
blue.
black one, and one's for the cooling fan. Remember what I told you about it running hot? All right, so about 8 inches behind the PVC is that high current relay center, and it contains a starter relay, a fan relay. There was a cover on it, so I couldn't see the relays until I removed the cover. Look at that. The heavy duty relay that drives the high speed cooling fan was totally destroyed. Probably by the snowball resistance syndrome. See that? Well, it looked like all burned up in there. The fuse I had pulled was one that supplies this relay with power, and so how did that factor into the clicking? All right, so there's cooling fan relay was shorted out right here. Okay, so there's power here, this is shorting out. What is this doing? All right, now what? Powertrain control module, cooling fan, PCM power relay. Oops, look at that. All right, so PCM power relay is supposed to be power out to this, but this was feeding it backwards, right? And the powertrain control module was also being fed by that same red wire. That red wire, not in this particular picture, but all right, with the key on, well, yeah, it wasn't that picture anyway. The long and short of it was that B plus source was feeding power down to pin 71 on this picture. I think I moved that picture. And that was turning on the engine controller. Well, when it turned on the engine controller say, oh, it's time to wake up and operate the fuel pump. Well, the extra current that was required to operate the fuel pump will cause the voltage to drop below what it required for the engine controller to come on. And the engine controller would say, oh, I don't have enough voltage to operate the fuel, to do anything now, so I'd go to sleep. And then it would come back up, and every time it tried to kick the fuel pump on, it was cycling back and forth. All because it was shorted out right there. So just remember that kind of thing, you know, every time you'd see that, it was doing this. It was doing it automatically because the pump would come on and do that. The CHT code and the low coolant were both related to that burned out relay. Fan wouldn't work because the relay was fried. The engine was getting hot in traffic, and it percolated the coolant enough to push the gallon out past the pressure cap. And it tipped his hand by cycling the PCM and the fuel pump, and finally by giving off that burning smell. That was really nasty. So I got an entire high current relay center from a salvage yard and did the necessary wiring. I just replaced the whole thing, soldered it in there, heat shrink and all that, replaced that whole relay center with new relays and all that, and we were done for the day. All right, anybody got any questions or comments? Were you bored to tears?
No, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and that was one of those things that I did when I was by myself, and I didn't have, sometimes whenever I'm trying to get my act together on a problem that's beating me up, what I like to do is be here when there's nobody here but me, if it makes any sense, you know. And when there's nobody here but me, I can usually figure something out. But when I've got being dragged from pillar to post, you know, a lot of the times I can't think about anything. So sometimes I got to get here by myself where I can focus on it. You know, there's other ones I've had to actually just get here where it was really quiet, where there's nobody around. But a lot of the times when you're working in a shop, they'll leave you alone if you're working on something like that, so that they'll know that you need to be left alone. But sometimes they may pull you off of this job, and they'll say, well, I know this is a customer wait, but we need you to go ahead and pull off of this one customer wait to work on this other customer wait. And then we need to pull you off of that customer wait and put you on another customer wait. You may want to work on 3 customer waits at the same time and all that. Do y'all have customer waits over there?
Well, just on our side, tires and oil change, not really a lot on the other side. Usually they just leave them for an hour.
Yeah. How many cars a day you run through the shop?
We've done a lot of oil changes, so not a lot of oil changes yet.
Yeah. Well, what usually goes on the other side of the shop?
Whatever cars they go.
Yeah, what are they doing?
Hot mix and stuff,
Yeah.
usually.
I mean, they do, is it, now I know Will is a big diagnostics guy, you know, and all that.
No, he usually does it and gives it to one of them.
Yeah, okay.
There's a lot of trains, let's see, one dude this, last week, for the transmission, we put a new one in. The other one's do air conditioning.
All right.
I don't know, they don't.
All right, so you see this resistor right here? See this one right here? This is blue, yellow, red. Somebody tell me what the resistance is of it. What's the first?
6.
Okay, the first one is 6? First one 6?
Yes.
All right.
6.
Okay, so that's 6. What's the second one?
What's the other one?
Huh?
642.
Yeah.
642.
6, 4. What's the 2?
Correct.
1,000.
I mean, what would be the resistance to the resistor? You gave me the 3 numbers, but what's the resistance, huh?
6.4,
Oh,
okay.
6, 4 with 2 zeros, right?
Yeah.
Cause red, see, red. So there's your 2 zeros right there. All right, now what about this one here? We got red, black, green. Do that one.
good. 2 0 5.
Huh?
205.
I can't see.
205?
25.
Okay, so that's 2 and 0 and then 5 more zeros, right? Is that 250,000
5
or
0.
205,000?
I can't see.
It's 5 zeros, so you got 6 zeros, so that's 2 million in it. What about this one here? I got purple, all right, violet, let's call it violet. I got violet, black, and blue. What is that one?
I can't see that one.
You said black and blue?
You know, I got violet, black, and blue.
7 0.
Huh? 70 million. Okay, what
Seven.
about black, red, and gray? Big Billy ran over young George because Vicky grew weed.
That's pretty good.
Well, I made that up because I didn't like the one they used to use in the 40s, you know.
Which was what?
Big Billy ran over young George because Vicky grew weed.
What's the old one?
Huh?
What's the old one?
One that I don't want to say on camera.
Must have been pretty bad.
It was ugly. All right, we got green, white, and gray.
I can't see that one. Give me your paper, Jen.
Green is 5.
Huh?
Green is 5.
Green's 5, what's white?
Why?
9, that's very good. What about gray?
8.
All right, so 8 zeros. All right. Now, let me ask you this. If I come up here and hand you an actual resistor at random when we're in the shop, are you going to be able to look at it and think about it from out of here and do it? Now, the ones over, after I ran these guys over at Geneva through this thing right here, this group I got now, a month later I could come up and hand it to them, and within 10 seconds they could tell me how much resistance that resistor had. That's pretty cool. Hey, you need to hit Will with this. You know what I'm saying? Hey, tell me how much the resistance is with each one. He'll say, why do I need to know this? You know, let's not be bothered with this. We're thinking about other stuff. You know. All right. I just wanted to make sure everybody had gone through that and everything. But